Hey everybody, today I have one single question. How does the music in Fallout New Vegas work? Okay, so there's a couple of different ways that Fallout New Vegas uses music. Firstly, you have an original score composed by Inon Zur, and he created a 35-track ambient music score to play throughout the game, and that's actually been released as the New Vegas original game soundtrack. So this is ambient background music that you'll hear in locations all across the Mojave. This original ambient soundtrack by Inon Zur is supplemented by the reuse of music from the original two Fallouts, the music by Mark Morgan that I covered in my original video. It's reused fairly sparsely, it only pops up here or there, but it is there, and it's a great throwback for enjoyers of the original two games. And frankly, the ambient music in Fallout New Vegas is probably the most underrated music in the game. In my opinion, Inon Zur always delivers stellar soundtracks, and the ambient music in Fallout New Vegas is no exception. But I feel like I've buried the lead enough here. When we talk about Fallout New Vegas music, the first thing that comes to mind is the radio stations. So at any point during your adventures through the Mojave, you can open up your Pip-Boy and tune in to radio stations. The two major music radio stations are Mojave Music Radio and Radio New Vegas. So in this way, it's a very similar experience to GTA games, where while traveling for long periods through the expanse of the open world, you can tune into a radio and listen to some music and a little bit of talk radio as well. Let's start by talking about Radio New Vegas. It's the main radio station of the Mojave, and it's presented by disc jockey Mr. New Vegas. Radio New Vegas is intended to have a little bit of a Las Vegas flair and focuses on music from the 40s, 50s, and 60s. Mojave Music Radio, on the other hand, has no disc jockey and no talk radio component. It focuses solely on country, western, and rockabilly music. Okay, so I think it's time that we break down a few of these iconic radio tracks. Let's start with Frank Sinatra's Blue Moon. Blue Moon is a jazz standard. It was originally written in 1934 by Richard Rodgers and Lorenz Hart, and since then countless artists have done their own version of Blue Moon, including Elvis Presley's 1956 version from his self-titled album. Sinatra's version is off his album Sinatra's Swingin' Sessions, released in 1961. While this was during the peak of his career, it's not recognized as one of his most iconic albums. In fact, his version of Blue Moon is probably most famous for being in New Vegas. Picking a relatively unknown Sinatra track probably helped a lot with licensing costs. But having Sinatra on the soundtrack is a huge boon to the Las Vegas feeling. Sinatra famously performed prolifically in Las Vegas at the Sands Hotel and Casino and at Caesar's Palace. A big part of his reputation and aura was attached to the nightlife allure of Las Vegas. In terms of the actual construction of the song, the instrumentation features a big band jazz ensemble with lush strings and soft horns. They work to support the hero component of the song, which is Sinatra's impeccable legato phrasing that made his voice so iconic. His romantic and nuanced delivery emphasized the emotional depth of the piece. It's a sentimental and sophisticated song, but the harmony is not all that complex. It's in C major, moving from the 1 chord to the minor 6 to the minor 2 to the dominant 5 and then back again. So it's a 1-6-2-5 progression, which is incredibly common in jazz standards. So I would call Blue Moon a quintessential jazz ballad as performed by Frank Sinatra. It's extremely straight down the line. Even though it isn't iconic Sinatra, it's quintessential Sinatra. It's exactly what you picture when you imagine Sinatra. And that imparts an indelible character on New Vegas. Let's move on. Next, I want to talk about Heartaches by the Number by Guy Mitchell. Guy Mitchell was an extremely successful singer. He sold 44 million records in his time. He was also successful on television, and Heartaches by the Number is one of his most iconic tracks. The song itself is country pop and tells the story of a woman repeatedly leaving and returning to a man and causing him heartaches by the number. It's an upbeat tune that moves with a fast shuffle rhythm, has a steady backbeat, and a light amount of syncopation. It's a danceable and lively honky-tonk track. The cheerful nature of the instrumentation and the harmony juxtapose the bittersweet nature of the song and gives it sort of an ironic feel. Heartaches by the Numbers, I think, is representative of the country music portion of the New Vegas soundtrack. And the last song I wanted to talk about is probably the most iconic one. It's Big Iron by Marty Robbins. Big Iron was originally released in 1959 on Marty Robbins' album Gunfighter Ballads and Trail Songs. For the modern generation, Big Iron is probably Marty Robbins' most iconic song, but at the time of the release of that album, El Paso was actually much bigger and won the Grammy Award for Best Country and Western Recording. Interestingly, Marty Robbins was a very, very successful country and western singer and was also, for a time, a NASCAR driver. The song, as you probably already know, tells the story of an outlaw loose and runnin' by the name of Texas Red, who is hunted down by a ranger with a big iron on his hip. It follows what we call a strophic form, where each verse has the same melody and harmonic structure, and what changes is the lyrics. By keeping the structure as an exact repetition, the listener is forced to focus on the lyrics as the only changing element. The melody itself uses stepwise motion, so very small motion, and Marty Robbins uses a limited vocal range, making the melody straightforward and conversational, so it's easy for a listener to understand. This song is all about the storytelling, and it's a story that keeps you company as you journey through the Mojave. So I think talking about these songs has highlighted the importance of jazz and country and western to the feel of the music in New Vegas, and maybe giving you some insight into how that feel is created. And so, in my opinion, there are a few really interesting things going on here that are worth talking about. First of all, that ability for the player to turn music on whenever they like is very empowering. In games without a radio system, music is sort of forced upon the player. It just plays when it plays, and you're told to enjoy it. You have no meaningful in-world agency to turn the music off or on at your discretion. If you're playing through God of War and an epic battle happens, epic music is coming on whether you like it or not. Another one of the really big things here is that this music is licensed popular music and not originally composed music. It's completely different from the approach of Fallout 1 and 2, and although I haven't heard this confirmed anywhere, it's almost certainly highly influenced by Grand Theft Auto. Using licensed music instead of originally composed music dates back to the landmark work Easy Rider. This Dennis Hopper film starring Peter Fonda and Dennis Hopper as motorcyclists on a trip through a countercultural American landscape used a soundtrack of exclusively popular music from the period. This was a big deal because it located the film in the pop culture zeitgeist of the era. Now, Grand Theft Auto did this to great effect, most notably starting in Vice City, which is all licensed music. GTA 3 was a split of original and licensed music, and San Andreas continued that trend, and they still do it to this day. Using licensed popular music is a way of placing you in an exact time and exact location. You are using real cultural artifacts to say, hey, this is where we are. In San Andreas, you feel like you're in Los Angeles in the 1990s because that's where the radio puts you. It's the same with Vice City. You feel like you're in Miami because there's new wave, there's jungle, there's house music. It's the same in Easy Rider. It puts you right in the middle of 70s counterculture because you're listening to the Byrds, Jimi Hendrix, Steppenwolf, and the Monkees. But what's really interesting about New Vegas is that it is set in the post-apocalyptic future. It's not set in the 40s, 50s, 60s Las Vegas, America. So the music you're hearing is completely anachronistic. It's outside of the time that it should exist. You're way in the future. You're shooting laser beam guns and fighting with mutants, but you're listening to Marty Robbins. So the licensed music doesn't place you in 60s America. It places you in this strange world where the only artifacts they have left are from 60s, 50s, and 40s America. One of my favorite things about the way they use music on these radios is that it's actually really limited. There's not much that you can listen to, and that works for two reasons, I think. Number one, you have to listen to the same music over and over so you get really familiar with it, and music that people get familiar with, they care about more. You learn the lyrics, you learn how it goes, you're ready to come along on the journey of the song. I mean, how many of us know almost all the lyrics to Big Iron? Also, it makes perfect narrative sense in the universe. How do they even have these recordings? This must be a small collection of recordings somehow preserved through the nuclear war that is being played over this radio. So this is all the music they have access to, and this shapes who they are. Even after this nuclear war, humanity is trying to come back to the remnants of civilization to hold on to meaning and humanity. They do it by trying to reestablish the new California Republic. They do it by trying to re-establish the government, aka the Enclave. They do it by rebuilding Las Vegas as a gambling town. And they do it by holding onto all of these old cultural artifacts and building the new culture around those. And so this idea that this 60s and 50s stuff is all that's left over, and that's what we're holding on to as the true form of humanity in this harsh wasteland, I think is brilliant. And the radio system is incredibly effective for putting you there. One of music's great powers is as an emotional sledgehammer. It can really tell you what to feel and give you a vibe immediately. And so having that be accessible to the player throughout the course of the entire game really impacts their experience. These songs become the soundtrack to all of their emergent experiences across the runtime of the game. They become personal and meaningful. Anyway, the radio system in Fallout New Vegas is great, and I love when games use radio systems. It's cool that Fallout has continued to do it, so I hope in Fallout 5 we get that as well. I was really happy to see Cyberpunk do a radio system. I thought that was great. We're obviously going to get more radio music in GTA 6 at the end of the year, and I think more developers should think about ways to empower their players to have agency over their musical experience in the game, because it creates such an emotional connection with the music. The music in Fallout New Vegas has meant so much to so many people, despite it being a very small track listing with some music that's over 80 years old. And I think the things we talked about today are some of the reasons why.